Please welcome Portia Perkins.
All righty, awesome. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining today. I'm going to go ahead and share screens. So, oh, yay, I can see y'all on the side of my screen. We figured it out. So can you give me a thumbs up if you can see the presentation screen? Awesome. So good morning. Well, really good afternoon, everybody. It's 12, at least in DC. My name is Portia Perkins, and I currently serve as the Federal Lands Associate at Defenders of Wildlife here in Washington, DC. And our main focus is on native wildlife conservation. But my background is in wildlife and fisheries biology and forestry with an emphasis on herpetology and understanding the social aspects of forestry and prescribed fire. My work alone centers the African diasporic experience in discussions of landscape management and natural resources. And in that same vein, just as Riley was saying, I use poetry, art, storytelling, or story keeping and connection to achieve understanding and propel abstract thought. And today I'm going to use that very special skill and a little bit of joy to help me discuss one of the most popular or poplar trees in the contiguous United States. So the tulip tree, or Liriodendron tulipifera. Since I'm from the southeast, I'm probably going to say tulip poplar a lot more than I say tulip tree, but we're going to run around a lot of names today. But just keep your eye on the prize, which is that big showy flower that we're going to get to, and that's shown all around me. So this presentation will cover range, identification, and various ways the tulip tree shows up in our collective lived history. And then we'll end the presentation with a few tidbits on climate impacts, because that's where we are in the world. The tulip tree is known for being one of the tallest, most attractive, and most beautifully aging trees in North America. And it boasts ages really as old as longer than 300 years, but we're just gonna go with what they write down in the papers, and heights well over 100 feet tall. The tulip tree itself is suspected to have been around since really the age of the dinosaurs, which was between 145 million to 66 million years ago. It's often considered to be in the Magnolia family or Magnoliaceae, and you'll find that sort of identification factor in a lot of different books. For this presentation specifically, I use a book about native trees in the Southeast that I've used 100 times before, and they put them in Magnoliaceae. However, this isn't like their perfect place. It's really more of a close relative. So when you think of the Magnolia family, think of what's here on the top right, which is this large showy flower amidst dense green leaves. And then at the bottom there is Sweet Bay Magnolia, which again shows this big, beautiful white showy flower amidst dense broadleaf large green leaves. So to the left here is an image of Archaeanthis, which is a rendition that was created from fossils of the ancestors of the tulip tree, and it was discovered by biologist David Dilcher of Indiana University and Mikhail S. Romanov of the MV Titian Main Botanical Garden in Moscow. So their findings really suggest that the two species, which I'll show when we go through some more identification, or maybe next, of the Eastern US, which is the actual tulip tree that we're talking about and specifically focus on today. And then there is Liriodendron Chinese, which is the Eastern China version of the same plant. And they both live in the family Liriodendraceae and have separated from other magnolias many years ago. Therefore, showing the tree's evolutionary history matches that of other ancient tulip trees and represents itself in its own flowering plant family. The tulip trees today are distinctly related to Archaeanthis based on the details of their fruit structure and their seeds. So I'll detail those fruit and seed structures here shortly when we go through identification, but I just want to add to how timeless this species is. So here we have the herbarium print from the Staten Island Museum, which was collected there in Staten Island in 1877 by Nathaniel Lord Britton, who was one of the original founding members of the museum. Now, clearly, this is a million bajillion years after these suspected ancestors were found. And even in that time, it was regarded as one of the most impressive native trees. And as well, currently, the oldest tulip tree in Staten Island lives in Clove Lakes Park, which is a waterways connection from the park's namesake, Clove and Martling Lake. And this is important because tulip trees find their way on moist, well-developed soils, which clearly can be found at the park given the long nature of the living tulip tree. All these years later, we're still talking and still marveling over like how amazing this tree is. So when what's even better about the tulip tree is that there's hundreds and thousands of tulip trees that can be found throughout the eastern United States. And so I'm going to show you guys this range map here from the plants database. And so the tulip tree itself ranges as all throughout the eastern United States and up through parts of Canada as far reaching as southern Ontario, and then as far south really as about north central Florida. After that, obviously you'll start seeing a lot more tropical species. 75% of their growing range alone is located between Pennsylvania and Georgia. So in many of my road trips, there is seldom a place along the I-85 highway where you can't see tulip poplar reaching out to just get a piece of that sun. Throughout its range, tulip trees grow in moist yet well-drained sites, like I said before. For example, in the Appalachian Mountains, you would often find them in forest coves. Forest coves are kind of on the opposite of the hottest, driest part of the forest or a mountainous area when you go down into this more moist, dense vegetation. And sunlight reaches very, very deep. Alternatively, in your day-to-day walks, you might see them along roadways, adjacent to waterways, or here in DC, for instance, at Rock Creek Park, you might find tulip trees among other deciduous broadleaves like American beech. They can show up in so many places because of the distinctive temperate climate we have here that often welcome soft green leaves of deciduous trees. And even after disturbance events like roadway constructions, signs of moisture often appear to be signs that tulip trees will show up relatively quickly. Due to its notoriety, the tulip trees has many other names like yellow poplar, tulip magnolia, white poplar, whitewood. But just so we can be clear, the tulip tree or yellow poplar is neither a tulip nor a poplar at all. And just to give you an example, to the right at the bottom is Eastern Cottonwood, which is actually a poplar, and their leaf structure is really totally different, and also so is their seed structure, but the method of dispersion is not different. They each use wind in a way to disperse their seeds. But no matter, I'm going to give you guys the top features you should always remember about the tulip tree that will help you identify it. And we're going to start off with the shining star herself. And I'll come back to this in a second, is the showy flowers, which I have danced all around me in my background here. The showy flowers of the tulip tree are really what gives it its name. They're often described as a vibrant greenish yellow with blotches of orange inside 5 petals that create the tulip-like shape. These flowers usually appear in the spring after the leaves have already started to grow in. The leaves are highly distinctive as well. I always call them kitten ears or cat ears because no matter how big and small or slightly rounded, those first 2 pointed tips, they always show up, even on the tiniest little tulip tree sprouts. So the leaves alternate on the stem and usually have 4 to 6 lobes, which you will see here going 1, 2, 3, 4, and very shallow sinuses, which I'm going to come back to the importance of the difference in the sinuses, which is basically where the leaf dips in, back on the picture of Chinese poplar. So in the autumn, the leaves become a really bright yellow and are a reminder of the gorgeous flowers just the season before. And actually, like that's a really big ornamental feature of having tulip trees on along streets or in areas, because in the fall you get this very vibrant display. But just to bounce back here to show you the difference in the leaf, on the left is Liriodendron tulipifera. On the right is Liriodendron Chinese. And the difference really is that in the Chinese version of the tulip tree, the sinuses are very, very deep. The lobes come out very, very sharply, versus on our, Eastern American version of the tulip tree, you have this very like curved bottom, and each of the lobes have some level of curve to them rather than them being, and they're also not deep sinuses. So that is the best identification feature difference between those two in the living family within Liriodendron. So the next thing is the fruit. So the fruit of the tulip tree is where it finds similarities with some magnolias too, because it's this cone-like structure. The other magnolias have a bigger, more wider, I would feel like, structure, also softer, versus this one is very much more cone-like, facing upright with lots of winged samaras, not like maple samaras or what we think of as helicopters. These help the seedlings disperse far and wide by wind. And when the fruits dry out in the fall, the scales often sit atop the tree's branches or will fall to the ground. So as a reminder, in the spring and in the fall, you're going to want to look up not only for the show, but because it will help you identify it. Sorry. And this is it over here is an example of what the scales would look like on the ground following. And here are the seeds that are dispersed by wind. At heights over 100 feet, the stoic grayish white bark laid over a strong and straight trunk requires one to stop and look up. These are really big trunks and truly a spectacle. In the circumstance that you might be looking down in the fall, you can always look for this like very identifiable gray bark, but sometimes that can get confusing. So you still kind of want to see if you can find little pieces of the fruit or little pieces of the seed that will help you bring together the collective identification features and know that you've indeed found a tulip tree. So now that I have given you enough to identify who the tulip tree is and where you can find it throughout the Southeastern United States, I'm going to give you some ways that the tulip poplar connects to people and also wildlife. So we're going to start this section that I'm going to call Poplar Culture. And it's about the many ways that tulip tree appears in our life practices and environments, making this tree really one of not only the most versatile and varying soil types and among temperature changes, but really an iconic symbol of like life here in the Southeastern United States. So to begin, the tulip tree has been used abundantly as a source of food and timber. For indigenous nations like the Cherokee and Lenape, and here fellow Algonquians, the wood from the tulip tree proved to be very buoyant and was used to build these dugout canoes, which was a serious undertaking involving digging out literally the innards of the tree and going through this digging and burning process. The Cherokee word for canoe is spelled like Shiyu, but pronounced like Jiu, and the vessels created through this process served as common means of transportation instead of walking through rivers and canals. The tree was also used as a really large medicine source to cure coughs, stomach issues, and even skin irritants. And then, of course, the nectar of the flowers is used for honeybees and hummingbirds, and the leaves often provide a significant amount of shade. It is also a wood that provides significant economic growth, and the wood is malleable, virtually pest-free, and makes for easy to work with and desirable furniture and siding. I'm going to show a picture of a chest here soon. The tulip tree also appears as a state tree of 3 different southeastern states, which kind of makes it a triple threat in a sense. Indiana, Kentucky, and Tennessee all both not only admire but have a wealth of tulip trees within their state lines. And here is a chest actually that was made from tulip poplar from a family in Maryland. So really a beautiful bark for a chest with like awesome striations and everything. But it's cool to see that it can be made into so many things and have so many uses and it's still going to be used for all this time. So in the early 1800s, a famous New York poet by the name of William Cullen Bryant, of who I actually have a cousin with a similar name, writes in his poem, The Fountain, the tulip tree high up opens in airs of June her multitude of golden chalices to hummingbirds and silken winged insects of the sky. While the euphoria of spring emerges as a theme in the tulip tree story, very often, as we've talked about how impressive and beautiful and brilliant it is, the tree also tells a story of loss and hardship. In 1939, singer Billie Holiday covered the 1937 version of Abel Meeropol's version of Strange Fruit, which solidified the tulip poplar as an emblem of not only fear, but a call to social justice. As she shrills, southern trees bear a strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the root. Black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. Pastoral scene of the gallant South, the bulging eyes and the twisted mouth, scent of magnolias, sweet and fresh, then the sudden smell of burning flesh. Here is a fruit for the crows to pluck, for the rain to gather, for the wind to suck, for the sun to rot, for the trees to drop. Here is a strange and bitter crop. With her voice, Billie Holiday shapes and embodies the loss of hundreds and thousands of Black people through the terrorizing practices of lynching in the American South. But that language alone propels the song and not only the tree into pop culture spins. In Kanye West's 2013 track, Blood on the Leaves, he uses the song to depict a lost love. And there always seems to be this balance of love and fondness with loss and infamy in the same tale as the tulip tree. In the same year, 2013, Petals from the Tulip Tree was released by Earl Pickens and Family, which is a bluegrass group based in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. And they sing, petals from the tulip tree are laying down round my feet. It's just a year ago, you know, she said she'd always love me so. Now here I stand, a solitary man, alone beneath the tulip tree, where she proclaimed her love to me. So lots of feelings of love and ambition and like these one in a lifetime experiences, all while just so happen to be sitting underneath a tulip tree. So what you notice not only in the music is that, which I just told you, but also a variation in the name of choice for the tree, which we bounced around a lot with as well. But that also recognizes the tree as this beacon and significant fixture of life and its happening. So really, for many, the tulip tree may come to mind in some more discrete ways. For example, a street named Poplar, which appears both here in Maryland, in Tennessee, and in South Carolina. And specifically, the image here shown to you to the left is that of Poplar Ave, which is in Memphis, Tennessee. And as of 2020, many leaders, many city leaders and social justice leaders are working to change the name of this street from from Poplar Ave to Black Lives Matter Ave to recognize those. The tulip tree can also show up in more grandiose ways, like the giant shown here of the Great Smoky Mountains, with canopies soaring high over human reach and leaf litter trailing underneath our heels. But fortunately, there is no sign of the beloved tulip tree scaling back on any appearances. So we'll get into pests, diseases, and climate change here. So overall, the IUCN, or the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, which is popularly used to figure out the status of species and update new scientific information, has listed yellow poplar as a species of least concerns. So pretty much all this means is that the population is seen by scientists who study it as stable, and they exist well and are surviving well within their native range. So they're not being moved out per se. They're allowed to live where they're trying to live and continue to flourish on. So even though that is the case, there's still a number of decline in more mature members in the population due to multiple commercial uses like timber and medicine, like we kind of talked about before. So though the species appears virtually indestructible, the Natural Resource Conservation Service plant database and their plant guide shows problems from pest and disease. Like what's to the left is a yellow poplar wheat evil, and to the right is Necria canker. And so the yellow poplar wheat evil, or sometimes called the tulip tree leaf miner, damages the leaves on the tree through rapid reproduction on the leaves. And at sometimes, like here, there's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the leaf. But as I understand, there can be up to 20 or more on a leaf at a single time, simply constantly adding to dieback. And a similar issue, though through a fungus, happens with Necria canker, which is a fungus that creates multiple cankers and causes the dieback of twigs and branches. But not only does this specific canker affect tulip trees, they affect about 50 plus other southeastern trees as well. So it's more of these being pests and diseases that can happen and that can ramp up over time, but they also affect other trees as well, and can be fought off if the tree has enough vigor and resources, etc., and so on. Other considerations to the species survival are adverse and unknown effects brought on by growing climate change. And I tried to keep these really brief because climate change affects every species in different ways, but most of the climate change factors that have to do with yellow poplar, I would say, are a little bit more general. So a study was conducted in Indiana in 2020 that detailed adverse effects to the radial growth of tulip poplar that could result from increased drought frequency, which would limit moisture in well-established soils that the tree depends on. There's also a small window of change due to increasing temperatures that can extend the growing season into warming winters. It will even be impacted by a change in forest compositions as other species continue to fight for the same resources and have to adapt accordingly. The other thing that could happen is too, if temperatures continue to increase and reduce habitat for moist soils for the seeds to start and grow. It could also lead to pollinators like honeybees and like hummingbirds from leaving the area or going to find other more virulent subjects to get nectar from, pretty much. So even though the tulip tree has lasted for so long, I think it's pretty fair to say that unlike American chestnut, which we talked about last time and is pretty much like leaving us, we know that this tree is going to be here to stay. So this is a tree that through fondness and well-established, it has grown up with us and with us through time. And as always, trees have hope deeply rooted and millions of genes ahead of us. So the tulip poplar indeed will live on as far as we see it. The tulip tree will be a constant reminder of who and what makes our lives here in the United States possible, and was definitely a smart selection by the Staten Island Museum collectors to note its majesty along their adventures. So with that said, I really want to thank the Staten Island Museum again for having me for a second time. And I wish you all a lot of love, peace, and good health. And I just want to again bring attention to the 140 objects collection, which you can find online at statenislandmuseum.org/140 objects. And I'm happy to answer questions now with our last few minutes.
Thank you so much, Portia. We are looking in the chat. We have a comment from Liz. Thanking you.
Thank you. Thank you, Liz.
She says, I feel like for those who might study tarot, the tulip tree is a vessel like the cups and a navigator of emotions, not just the cup-shaped flowers, but the canoe that navigates the waters.
Oh, yes, definitely. I feel the same. If I can say, I felt instantly connected to this tree when Riley brought it up for me to do, because when I was a dendrology student, like a lot of the experiences I was having with trees and like what I call like, like kind of like getting to know them as like their own people and their own like beings. And this was like a tree that there was always something with it. There was always something more to learn about it. Somebody else who had a different feeling, it was constantly like somebody special. So it was exciting to talk about it more.
Thank you so much. I noticed at one point that that you referred to the tree as a who, and I was like, that somehow feels right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions? Just a lot of encouraging words in the chat.
Oh, awesome. Thank you guys so much. I'm just now seeing the chat.
Thank you, everyone. We learned so much from you today. Portia, thank you so much.
Yes. Oh, wait, we can order the prints too. I didn't know we could order the prints. Yes. This is awesome.
You heard it here first, people. Definitely. And I also want to plug upcoming programs at the Staten Island Museum. So we are doing in-person and virtual programs like today's. The next one coming up is a celebration around Korean Lunar New Year, which will be in person at the museum, limited capacity. Please register and find out some more information on our website. Thank you so much, Portia. Thank you for everyone for coming. And we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you, everyone.